Hey, good evening, everyone. David Jelks here, and it's very dark. It's getting to be very dark out again. Welcome to the heading into winter or fall, I should say. Um, so I want to get into this conversation this evening in around the topic of endometriosis. And what's interesting about this conversation, I just want to make sure. Can you guys hear me? Just can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Perfect. All right. Thank you. Yeah, so I just somebody approached me several weeks ago on LinkedIn, and there was a lady that was actually had a business that she had built working with developing products for women that were struggling with endometriosis. And we'll just use the word endo from now on. That might be a little bit easier. And so what was interesting, of course, is that now I've heard the term before. I didn't really know much about it, but but I got drawn into this conversation, and then I got drawn into this world. And what I was looking at these message feeds through. Hey, Rosa, I'll bring you in here. Now, how do I add this woman here? Okay, and there we go. All right, let's see if it brings her on.
Hi.
Yes. It's always one of these things where I kind of hold my breath going, either it's going to
Is it gonna work?
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
awesome. It's, I'll just give people a little background, how I ended up,
Mhm.
me, in this particular conversation.
Mhm.
And it was through, through somebody who reached out to me on LinkedIn about fasting and wanting
Yeah.
about fasting and may that would that be of
Mm.
any use to her? And then she talked about her journey through endometriosis, and then
Mm.
she found her own way through it, developed a series of products
Mm.
to alleviate discomfort, just things that were supportive of people on that process. She created a business in 2006 that was actually quite successful. But she kept sending me all these links and all these message feeds, and it was just um, there was zero positivity around it. It was just misery all the way through,
Mm.
hundreds of messages of misery. My life's falling apart, and I'm going, well, like it's I mean, I understand. I didn't know enough about it, and I'm going, well, this is it's not very, obviously not very positive. So I kept digging through, and what I did find was nothing. What I did find was confusion.
Mm.
I went through some of the medical literature, and so I started backing up. I said, well, okay, my problem is right now, I believe, is that I'm focusing on this thing, but the thing is never just the thing, right? It's a multi-causal problem.
Mm.
And so I started backing up and wanting to take a kind of a macro view of it. And trying to figure, okay, well, how many, it's just with this 100 trillion cell organism, I mean, how hard could it be? Right. Right. you know,
Yeah, how hard
so
can it be?
yeah. So listen,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
now, everyone, Rosa, we met through LinkedIn, I don't know,
Mm.
several years ago, I guess.
Yes.
And somehow we're always kind of on the peripheral of each other's vision. Like
Mm.
we kind of run into each other now and again, and maybe our incidental connection to LinkedIn led up to our conversation today. Who knows?
Definitely. Definitely,
So,
David. Yeah, it's so
yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
it is. Well, guys,
Mm-hmm.
listen. I want to give a little bit of a background on you.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said in my message, if I was attempt to have this conversation on my own, I'd be likely to be stoned to death by a bunch of women saying, "What is a guy?"
So wise. Such wisdom.
Well, the thing is, and my objective here is that
Mm.
it just I'm wired in a very unique way, and
Mm.
I look at, I can, my brain just goes in nine different directions with a problem because it's always multi-causal. There's always a whole
Mm.
bunch of things going on. But you, I mean, your background, I mean, so this lady's she's a clinical nutritionist, and this is the fun part here, specializing in nutritional medicine, which I love, and working towards her PhD in women's health with a focus on endometriosis.
Mm-hmm.
Funny that we should have this
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And the link between gut health, and of course, that's a big conversation of the last couple of years, the
Yeah.
microbiome, and
Mm-hmm.
what we're just starting to figure out. In fact, I just posted an article on
the potential issues with us using antidepressants and what gut bacteria does with it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
anyhow,
Yeah.
it's just
Fascinating. Mm.
oh, it's extraordinary. So yeah,
Mm.
so the link between gut health, chronic disease, and the gut and mind axis. She runs a functional medicine integrative medical clinic, and so you've been clinically involved for 15 years now
Yes,
in
I have.
your current field.
I have.
So it's first of all, what brought you into the whole whole field of interest? What got you started?
It was actually through an inspired action. Actually, it was an experience that I actually had as I actually was sitting in the GP's chair actually and seeing my own GP, and I was a runner back then, and I
Right,
was in athletics, and I had a injury on my spine. I had actually fallen on one of the hill runs, and I actually concussed. I actually concussed myself, and I hit the side of my head and my left shoulder and my left hip, and I was out of action, but I was this vibrant 26-year-old young woman sitting in the GP's chair, and just didn't feel that there was this kind of connection. I just felt like
right,
such a disconnect of, I wanted to be performing at that level, but I just felt that I wasn't getting the support that I was
right.
actually really searching for. And so then I guess coming from that sports medical approach and then seeing the GP, there was this strong disconnect. And that's when it started to lead me into my own journey of what nutrition is available, what's the multimodality approach here. That's when I kind of started to find Pilates, yoga, mindfulness on my own journey. And that was even
Right.
before any of the years that I was actually clinically researching or clinically studying such topics.
Right.
So it really came from this innate place of
Right.
an experiential kind of journey.
Well, and I think if we're self-aware and we are actually looking for something, we'll realize. I mean, really, you don't have to look very far to realize that we're not solving any problems with a silver bullet solution. Like
Mm,
like like
mm,
little or nothing is working. And I have huge respect for what science has been able to discover, because the natural world is open up to us in a way that we never ever be able to comprehend.
true.
Um, but it's but with this, when I looked at things like endometriosis, and of course, and then I look at cancer and I look at diabetes, look at all
Yeah.
these things,
Uh-huh.
the conversation still comes down to this is the one thing. And I go, well, but it's not credible, because there's so many people struggle with are afflicted with the same condition, but the severity of the issue varies massively from person to
Yes.
person.
Yes.
And it's, so there's all these other factors influencing, and that's part of the conversation that I wanted to have with you, is looking at, there is a multivariate issue here. There's just a lot of things going on, and you can't just focus on one thing. And if we need to back up, especially when it comes to our own self-care, and I believe, and I think it's been stated over and over again, that when it comes to endometriosis, first of all, it's hard to diagnose because it's an invasive procedure just to see if it's actually there,
That's
right? So
true.
it's
Very true.
arthroscopic. So the timeline is like anywhere up to 12 years of being misdiagnosed and being in pain. So here's one of the first things, and again, I don't want to take massive amounts of time, but this is such a fascinating conversation. The very first thing that came to mind when they talked about the timeline of the misdiagnosis is that I worked with people with chronic pain. I was involved in orthopedic rehab for years, and somebody who's had an arthritic hip for 15 years.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
that pain, well, obviously they won't do anything with it until the person's older. They'd rather not do it. They'd rather them suffer alone.
Yeah.
So chronic pain over time is extremely debilitating. It changes our whole neural network. Of course, it has a very negative influence on how we show up inside of our life. Um, and so part of the thing when you deal with chronic pain, I know that physical pain and emotional pain actually can get intertwined really heavily. And so part of the thought process, and you can you can guide me on this, is that would it be necessary to separate the two, being able, because I used to get people to give us a gradient on the pain. So I know you're having a bad day, but if it's your hip pain, I'll just speak from my point of reference. If we pull the hip pain apart away from your bad day, how much is the hip pain? How much is the bad day?
Sure.
And what I found, if people could separate those two, they could actually focus on, well, the actual pain is this. The pain's a 6 out of 10, but collectively it seems a 10 out of 10, and
Sure.
it became super overwhelming. So with endometriosis, I mean, that's it's a chronic inflammatory long-term issue.
Yes, it is.
So what is the
Effectively, yeah, the strategy is, and I think this is where the gut mind axis really came in powerfully and strongly, because it's about how do I actually break the loop system of the pain. So if I'm in pain, the mind is going into this kind of circle and really coming into that kind of signal of I'm in pain state. And so the first priority is to break the pain cycle. So how am I able, what's the ability there? On a physiological level, we have access now to gut-mind axis. So if the actual gut flora is there, then we can actually elevate our serotonin levels and change the serotonin levels to actually raise the feel-good hormones and make sure that it's a really clean environment from the actual gut, and allowing this relationship of gut-mind. So, and then behind that is a reduction of inflammation. So we've got the cytokines reducing, the anti-inflammatory kind of markers going down. We've got this uplift of mood, which gives us a really beautiful window of opportunity to come into pain. And then I love how you've referenced the emotional pain and the physical pain. I kind of come into a framework of mind and body alignment. So if we're actually working towards mind-body alignment, then there's this kind of natural mapping, I guess, of gut health, mind-body axis, and then the alignment of mind and body coming through. So that becomes the framework or the focus overall. And I love that we can actually then pinpoint, is it the physical, am I having pain through the endometriosis because of all the spasming that's actually occurring? Am I having the pain because I'm not able to get up out of bed, and so that's really painful emotionally, that I'm not able to function in my day? Yeah.
Well, and I think that was the part that I thought would be, again, I couldn't find a conversation around it. I found lots of conversations about everything else, but that's the first place I went to, because again, when you're looking at symptomology, being able to deal with, well, I need to be able to arrest the symptoms I'm dealing with. I need to function, right? So, and again, and chronic pain is chronic pain, regardless of where you're experiencing it. So it's, and the one thing that I witnessed in my own life, and I've of course witnessed in clients over the years, that when I'm unsettled here for any reason, and it was a really interesting example. I was giving my son a bath one night, and I was very frustrated with an employee. And so I had this thing going on the back of my head, and my son was in the bathtub, and he was being a child. He was splashing water, just being foolish. And I could watch my brain unload the energy from this part of my head, unload it on him. And I could actually see it like a little bolt of lightning going out, and I could watch this thing unfold. And it just, it had this horrific amazement. I just watching, I buffered the response, but I saw it so clearly, and it became this kind of horrific realization that if we had things that are uncontended, if we're dealing with a chronic issue, and we have a bunch of other things going on inside of our life, it's just the tendency is for what's unsettled here, let's say in my mind or my life, will actually hijack the pain. And it actually increases the amplitude of it. So, so
it's almost like a magnification.
Yeah, absolutely.
It magnifies.
But we don't see it as this other stuff in my life. We see it as the pain here is getting greater. So I believe we don't tend to be any wiser to the fact that, maybe some of these other concerns that were pre-existing, concerns around finances, concerns around relationships, maybe my present degree of health, whatever, all these things that were just festering in the background, now they found a portal to be expressed through the level of discomfort. It just seemed to open it up. Now, does that make sense? Is that something that?
It's a really lovely way. I think you've eloquently and in the sequence kind of really systematically presented that. And I think this is where the pain body expresses itself.
Right.
There's an expression for the actual pain body. And clinically I use this reference of pain body. And I think it's the totality of what you've just
Right.
beautifully and eloquently kind of described and systematically kind of taking us through a journey of the case that you presented. And I think, that the pain body has then an expression to be expressed. And,
Right.
and then through self-awareness and through the journey of becoming self-aware, then we have the ability of that witness state, that self-awareness
Right.
to rise and go, actually, it was amplified today due to this is what's going on in my personal
Right.
life, this is what's going on
Right.
at work, this is what's going on with my
Right.
finances, and I've got some clearing up to do. Yeah, totally.
So
Totally.
and I love that, because I think because really I think the conversation for me, it's always about how do we empower people? How do I empower myself, and how do we empower other people to not feel, certainly, we're not going to be overjoyed at the fact that we have this thing going on, but we also don't want to be the victims of it either. And I used to tell my clients that people that were sent in through insurance companies, they would come in for a knee issue or a back issue, and I'd often tell them that I said, it's just there's a real gift here, and the real gift is that you never would have come to see me otherwise, and you would have gone through your life and never really thought to address your mechanical health, and not thought to address your body. Now you're have an opportunity to actually address it all. And why not? This is a great opportunity. Maybe the universe is calling, if you want to think of it as in that kind of esoteric sign from the universe. There's some things that need to be cleaned up, and I think there's I think the mindfulness part is actually a beautiful way to start this journey. How would you, where would you direct people to if they think, yes, the mindfulness part is probably something I really need to get more into? Where would they go? Where would they start looking for practices like that?
You can actually look up mindfulness coaching. There's some really amazing yoga and meditation kind of centers, and also the discipline of Pilates as a really, kind of initial approach of this concept of mind and body kind of disciplines. And there's amazing teachers out there globally that practice this mindfulness movement.
Right.
But I think it's also in daily action that I'm mindfully eating, and I'm mindfully dressing, and I'm mindfully cooking my meals in the kitchen, and I'm mindful of my actions, and I'm mindful of my behaviors. So it can also be the daily practice of our actions and our behaviors, and how we mindfully approach the inner world of our inner relationship and the interpersonal relationships that we have with our partners, loved ones, friends, community.
Yeah, because I've seen the conversation, and I've seen the kind of the lament from various women on these, like through watching some of these Instagram posts, that it's the effect it's having on their relationships, their career, their intimacy, and it's just it can be obviously it can be a very devastating process to go through, but it's just, again, it's just I'm cautious not to I'm not to kind of downgrade the severity of what people go through, but the urgency of yes, this is happening, this is true, but there has to be, we got to start moving this thing somewhere else. And the mindfulness piece, which is really why I was so excited that you took the time to speak with us. So we're honored for that.
Thank you, David.
So for mindfulness, now I was looking up something. Now, one of the things when I looked at around endometriosis was dysregulation in autophagy. So, and for those of you that are unsure what autophagy is basically it's when the body when the body has this a process of actually getting rid of old cells that are ready for degradation. The body just wants to use up broken down material, so it actually doesn't replicate. And so the idea is that with the with the placement of this tissue, ideally the body should actually recognize that there's some foreign tissue being where it shouldn't be, and it would actually go after it and actually clean it up. So like those little robot vacuum cleaners you send around your house, and they're just picking up stuff that's not supposed to be there. But there's a dysregulation in a certain percentage of women. I think 15 to 20% of the female population in child rearing years, that this automatic cleanup of foreign tissue doesn't happen. Right. So,
Yeah.
and I was trying to figure out, well, there's some reasons for that. And so there's two components, and I want to talk a little bit about toxicity.
Sure.
There was genetics. They said, well, there's a genetic, there's a potential hereditary component to endometriosis. But the interesting genetic piece, there's a bit of a correlation. Now, it's not a cause, but they're seeing there's a correlation between a chemical called dioxin, which was used in forever. It's no longer used in the United States, but we've used it enough that it permeated the planet. Right, this stuff never goes away. And they found that there's a connection between this chemical dioxin, which is fat soluble, really hard to get rid of, and of course the prevalence of endometriosis. And they're looking for the correlation between those two.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when it comes to fasting, of course, ideally. After when you're into maybe 48 hours into a fast, your body will start accessing fat stores, and then you'll get the release of some of the stored chemicals. Most of these chemicals are fat soluble. Is fasting is that a safe thing for women to do when they have endometriosis? Is there a timeline when they should or should not do it? What are your thoughts?
I really love this question. I really love this question on multitude of layers, really. In the treatment protocol for endometriosis, I share that cleansing the derba. So I use these concepts of cleansing the actual cell from the outside of the cell, just like when we go to the dentist, we're taking off the plaque off our teeth. So we're taking the plaque off the actual cell for a few reasons. Initially, it's about the signal response from a neurological aspect, that the actual signal response is actually sharper, it's smoother, it's more clear, because as we know in chronic disease, we start to feel that our cognition and our memory starts to change, and it starts to be quite challenging for us to keep our concentration and the comprehension, because we're just getting so clouded and so taxed on this chronic inflammation. And so then we're giving the body the ability to cleanse the actual cell, have the direct transmission of the cell to the actual neuro signals, so the pathways are actually clearer and sharper and brighter. That is just the beauty of allowing that cleansing cycle to happen. And I think we can over cleanse as well, especially if we're coming from such a very toxicity kind of environment. So, and as we know that in endometriosis is high estrogen, progesterone. The high estrogen levels are actually increasing. The progesterone levels are actually decreasing. Some cases I've seen testosterone levels are actually decreasing. So then how do we re-regulate and rebalance these hormones? And like you shared on the toxicity of our environments, the estrogen markers are going to increase just due to an environmental toxicity. So we've got the epigenetics to consider on the toxicity level, which will, even if I didn't have endo, I would be challenged to re-regulate estrogen. But now that I have endo, then I'm actually even more challenged to regulate estrogen. So yeah, fasting, cleansing is very key in terms of trying to reverse the actual symptoms, or I would even go as far as to say to reverse the actual endo.
Well, I think that's part of the. Well, that was the idea, right?
I'd like to be challenged on that, but yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. When you look at fasting, and again, I was pouring through different sites. I was trying to find opinions, and I found lots of opinions, very little science, but lots of opinions.
Sure.
And with individuals that are actually, let's say they're quite ill, like their health is really not well. they have this, of course, they're contending with endometriosis, stress levels quite high. How would you passively help somebody like that to fast? They put them into a, like, so with a cleansing state, because I found in
Sorry,
the past that,
David, there's interference all of a sudden.
oh, yeah, so it's, if I'm dealing with, if I have somebody, if I'm working with somebody, let's say, for example, who's actually, who's uh, fairly unwell, like their quality of health isn't that great, the stress level is quite high. I found that individuals that maybe they have a fairly weak constitution in the beginning, fasting I found is not the best thing for them out of the gate because it just amps the stress level up even higher. What are some passive ways of introducing them to a bit of that cleansing fasting state, and how would you move them forward?
Sorry, David, there's some kind of technical issue. There's kind of this free play. I'm not sure what's happening there.
Are we getting some feedback here, or
Are we?
just one sec here? Hey, can you guys still hear us? Give us a thumbs up if you can still hear us. Let me try this. Will it work from here?
I think that's regulated now.
Is that better?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, let's try that. Well, we almost made it, right? We almost made it without affecting it.
Yeah, yeah.
So the question again. Okay, but yeah, that's
There
actually,
seems to be a time delay. Sorry, David. There's like a
yeah.
time delay. I'm not sure what's going on.
Sorry. Well, you are 17 hours away.
Yeah.
Okay, so well, and I'm fast. I'll slow my speech down here. So the question was around fasting for people that are have a fairly weak constitution. Let's say they're weak constitution. They're really not well. Like they're not have been doing well. They have endo, and they hear that fasting can be a really good thing. But I found people that if the stress level's high and they had that kind of weak constitution, even though there may be a potential benefit for fasting, I find that they can't tolerate the low blood sugar. They can't tolerate going any length of time. How would you move somebody from that condition to becoming able to go on to, let's say, a full 24-hour fast? How would you graduate somebody, or where would you start them?
Sorry, David. There's a little bit of delay on the actual from a technical issue.
That's all right.
So if you can hear me,
Yeah.
great. So
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I can hear you good.
I think there's interference, but I'm going to do my best to answer the
Yeah.
question because I think we did so well technically.
Yeah.
So I think it's a gentle approach. So you're actually with the individual, you're actually working together.
You're good. You're good.
Sorry, David.
No,
What's happening is that I'm actually hearing myself in a delay, and then I'm trying to speak, which is I'm not sure it's going to
Why don't you
work.
just try to just unhook them, take them out. Let's see, try it.
Is that better?
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay. So sorry, my apologies. So I think it's the gentle approach and it's about the individualized program so that you're looking at the case study as the individual and so that you're delivering a program on the actual individual case study in front of you. So if someone's coming in from a very weak constitution and they feel quite fragile and quite vulnerable, then it's just this slower pace of still cleansing and still having the same protocol, the same kind of treatment protocol around that, but we're just going to scale it back until we actually.
All right. we'll bring her back on. She'll just, yeah. So just hang tough, guys. We'll get her back. We'll get her back. Yeah. So the reason the question I was asking and the reason why I was posing it is that, you know, one of the things about fasting is that fasting is a great tool for cleaning up that process. Fasting is a great tool. There she goes. Fasting is has been known to, of course, help with that cleanup process. Fasting has been.
Here I am.
It's all right.
Hi.
We're all good. Yes,
Wow.
thank you, Facebook. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, and God, feedback. Goodness. Well,
Yeah.
well, it's try with the earpiece back in. See if that gets rid of it. There we go. Yeah, see that gets rid of it a little bit. There we go.
Hi.
Yeah, see, we're making it. Yeah, well, and again, I just you know, as we're talking, and I appreciate the fact you talked the really gentle approach because it is, and scalable is the word. It's the same with exercise. You know, you don't you know, decide after a 5-year hiatus that CrossFit's going to be your go-to for your first introduction to
Yeah.
exercise, and wonder why your spine doesn't feel so good the day after. So, and so it's, if you're going to create a hierarchy, so, you know, we deal with the potential of environmental toxicity, which of course can be a part of the problem, or exacerbate the problem. We know that diet, you know, I would say a diet that's not really well regulated or well thought out, that can have a negative impact. We know that mental emotional stress that's not regulated, you know, if you're not actually trying to work on it, that can have an impact, you know. And because we spoke a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about unpacking this thing.
Unpacking.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things going on. So, you know, what would be the hierarchy if you were to say, you know, and again, I know it's tough to give a general recommendation because people are coming in at from all different levels. But if you had to say, listen, you know, here's your top three, if I was to say, or what this was the first place you should start, it would give you the maximum amount of benefit. This is the second place you would move into. This would give you the next, you know. So
Sure.
how would you kind of create a hierarchy if you could?
Sure. The first thing is the hope model. So, what is the goal? Where are we wanting to? What exactly are we wanting to achieve here for a better
Right.
tomorrow? So,
Right.
number one is hope. Number two is, and in conjunction with hope is your mindset. So, what is it that I'm going to shift here to create a positive change for my well-being and my future?
Right.
And number two is looking at lifestyle and the lifestyle umbrella of diet, nutrition, sleep, and exercise, and allowing all those beautiful feel-good hormones to come into the body to alleviate the pain body and to allow that feel-good emotion of motivation, inspiration, and thought.
Right.
And having the support around you, having the circle of influence around you, and being really about positive change and positive focus and positive support around you. I think they're the
Right.
top three.
Right. When you mentioned sleep, you know, I work with shift workers and try to help shift workers survive that the worst of all time frames. It's you know, it's funny. Shift work is the only one of the few behaviors that we have out there that is just it's a circadian rhythm action, but it's a known carcinogen, right? It actually it's not a correlation. It's a cause. It's a direct cause of cancer. So it's just we do such weird things. Humans, I don't understand it sometimes. But
Yeah. Yeah.
Sleep hygiene to me is a real big thing. Being able to, you talk about the fuzzy brain, and I remember years ago when I first introduced the idea of the lymphatic system, which I found is just such an extraordinary thing where, when we go to sleep, our brain actually swells to a large degree as we pump cerebral spinal fluid through it, and we wash out all the amyloid plaques and debris and metabolic waste that's created throughout the day. Um, so you look at the dysfunction of sleep, the irregularity of sleep, and of course that just exacerbates everything else, right? That is, of course, in turn, just make compound on the problem. So I think when you look at, the idea of that, getting that mindset right, saying, okay, I'm going to start looking at my lifestyle and see what I can start attending to. Um, Getting a support system, again, as you said, that's hugely crucial. Again, and what I was witnessing online was it was a bunch of people just saying, listen, we all have this problem, but there was no, and this is what we'll do about it, right? It's just everybody is going down, everybody was on the same sinking ship, and again, not to downplay the struggle and the physical discomfort and just the chaos that's created by having chronic pain. But there was no
Yes.
solution in the hundreds of comments. It was just everybody sharing the misery. And
Yes.
I just don't think that's very helpful. Obviously, I think you need to be around people that are going to move you forward, and even people to be able to help you, kind of unpack it when you can't yourself. That we
Yes.
have the go-to people that can
Yes.
kind of give you a place to be heard, but also give you a place to kind of reconcile and get back on your feet and then start again.
Yes. And the
Yeah,
fortitude that's required in that process, the fortitude of consistency and the discipline that requires that. And sometimes, I mean, we've all had seasons, I'm sure, in our lives where it's
right.
just been quite tough to actually put one foot in front of the other. And some days when you have endo and when you have chronic disease states, it can be that kind of intensity of feeling. And sometimes we can't seem to be self-expressive on that journey, that we feel either too vulnerable or there's guilt or shame, or and there's so many factorial reasons why we can feel so disempowered in those seasons of our lives. And
Right.
what is it going to require to step forward in that empowering model? So I think there's a learning there and there's a teaching there that
Right.
we can share on the endo journey, on the chronic inflammation and chronic disease, that it does require resilience. It does
Right.
require the mind and the body to become resilient to the actual disease, to the actual condition, that we're going to give it a good fight. We're
Yeah.
fighting it. We're not going to let go too easily.
Right.
We're going to rise with it.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah. Well, and again, because there's so many things occurring at the same time, I think being able to, contend with what you have the strength to contend with, and that's the reason why I wanted to have this dialogue, because again, it's just, I'm out of the loop when it comes to endometriosis, because that'll never be my problem. I've got my own problems. That's not one of them. But I
Yes,
do understand chronic pain. I do understand depression, systemic
yes,
depression. I get all that stuff. I've had lots of seasons where I'm going, it just, it when I contending with a chronic anything, either it'll take you out, or you figure it out, right? But sometimes you just take a knee. I remember, I remember being in my bedroom one time, and I thought I was losing my mind, struggling with something. And for half an hour,
yes,
I'm walking back and forth, pacing. And at the end of the process, it was just this thing that needed to worm its way through, and I had to sit there and just deal with it until it got out. And then at the end of it, I'm exhausted. It was like 30 minutes. I'm exhausted. But what it gave me the awareness of is that, it just any growth that I have comes with the shedding off of something that doesn't belong there, and that's not always a really comfortable thing to do. And sometimes it's easier just to go down with the ship. than it is to grow, because the growth can be really quite uncomfortable and very confronting.
Yes,
But
indeed.
but and I think chronic conditions like this force us into that corner. They force us to contend with it, saying you got to show up, and not only show up, but let's see. We have to find out what am I capable of doing? Who do I need to ask? And I think Tony Robbins has this quote. I'm not his biggest fan, but he has some really good quotes that come out. And he said, you continue until, and people said, until what? He said, until you figure it out. Like, you
Until
don't
you figure it
stop
out.
until you
Yeah,
figure it out.
absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. And I really loved how you actually raised, David, that it does put you in the corner, and you have to face it. It's like, okay, now it's time to face what it is that I need to see. What is it that
right,
I need to see here? What is it that I need to change? And if we're always, in that model of, as an example, a bit too proud to ask for help, maybe it's time for me to ask for that help.
right,
What is it, the
right,
help that I actually require? So I think going back to that individual approach is what is it here for the individual, and unpacking the story on an individual level is
right,
really key, and working in that mentoring way, in that one-on-one way, in that coach to coach kind of interaction is very helpful. And I think sometimes when I look back on my own journey, my own experience, and I kind of opened up today's discussion on the disconnect. If I'm just seeing my GP for 10 minutes, it's not really going to cut it. I really need to
right,
work with someone that gives me at least an hour of their time, an hour weekly as a training one-on-one coach, that I'm like, okay, this is the sequence, this is the protocol, this is the journey. Because
right,
it's really tough not going through something at this level, that you're not being guided. And I think
right,
that is really, you asked me, initially, what was it that really led me to my work? And that's really on point right here
right,
now, is I want to make the journey for others smoother and more successful on the back that I've learned,
right,
and the actual groundwork that I've
right,
experienced through my own suffering, through my own journey, if you call it that way. But
right.
it's through my own groundwork that's allowed me to conceptualize and create this framework and allow for progression. Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
you've created you've designed courses. Is it specifically for endometriosis, or is it a health process altogether?
They're actually, yeah, that's a really great question, because I use it as a fundamental framework approach to my sessions clinically, and I call them dive deep sessions. So the dive deep sessions have an intention to dive deep and unpack this gorgeous word, unpack. What is
Right,
it that we're actually dealing with? So I absolutely love, as you know, working with chronic
yeah,
disease, because it is multimodality, and it does require a multimodality approach, which that is the practitioner that I am. I am a multimodality practitioner. I think that we can't just look at things in one area. We can't just box people into things. We can't box diseases into one little scope. There's
right.
just on so many levels. And so, yeah,
So it's so with the so the programs that you set up now, you said that you run those courses is three parts. Of course, you go through case history, medical history. And I love the part because as you just mentioned, it's about hearing their journey, or like really trying to understand what is it they're contending with, and how did they get here. And I mean, there's a lot to the conversation. I think it's and you're right. 10 minutes doesn't give you any opportunity to process, give you a place to process all this kind of angst, for lack of a better word, all this buildup of frustration. Because if you have a family, you're trying not to take it out on them. You're trying to suck it up to look after your kids, and suck it up to be a partner, and suck it up to go to work because you need to keep your job, and all that sucking it up, all that repression, and having no place forward. I mean, it's just, of course, that you internalize it, which of course just elevates the degree of stress inside the body, which anything that's slightly inflamed will become more and more irritated. So I love that process of kind of as you said, unpacking it in the beginning to allow that in by itself must be incredibly therapeutic.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. And allowing a place for safety and allowing a place for someone to be heard on so many levels, I think
right,
is fundamental, especially if we're speaking about endometriosis, which takes almost 12 to 15 years of diagnosis. There's a lot of
right.
women there going through a long period of time not being heard at all. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah, and it's like I said, just going through the various medical sites on it, and I get emails now, new surgical thing here and a new drug thing here, and but again, they're dealing with a disease as if a person was not attached to it. Um, right?
Exactly,
That
exactly.
there was no intimacy being impaired. There was no fear of loss of employment or and it doesn't show up in any of the medical pieces I've seen. That's not the conversation. It's just a treatment on a fairly very specific level to the disorder, which nobody really understands why is there in the begin with.
Yes,
But again, yeah. So anyhow, I know this conversation could go on forever, but really, I think the end of the day, the reason why I wanted this dialogue is that because for any chronic anything that we're dealing with on a chronic level, as you say, it's multivariant. There's all these other things attached to it, and it's a matter of being able to either yourself, if you have the capacity, or with finding a practitioner, somebody like yourself, to be able to go through and start stripping it down and say, okay, this is obviously a problem, but it's not just the problem; it's a problem. The the inflammation I've been dealing with and discomfort, that is a big problem. But let's see if we can figure out what may contribute to it. What is making it worse? And can we start cleaning out some of the perimeters of these things? And all of a sudden we get a bit of a lifestyle shift. And then, ideally within that place, you learn mindfulness, right? You learn how to separate these pieces so that you can function and you become more self-aware, which is an incredibly powerful tool. You look at dietary habits and you start recognizing triggers in foods. I imagine that would be a part of that next,
yes,
being mindful, recognize what triggers you. Maybe it's nightshades. Maybe nightshades are the things that throw you
exactly.
off, right? But when you're not paying attention and the pain and everything's all kind of mashed together, you don't know what's affecting you. So I think,
So
yeah,
on point.
and again, and because again, I'm wired this way because I look at, as you are, to see all these pieces. I think it's so important um, because at the end of the day, we are the only ones going to take ourselves where we need to be. We can get, there's lots of
Exactly.
guidance out there, but we have to be able to say, okay, yes, this, I just can't spend another 5 years in this condition. If nobody's going to help me,
Absolutely.
I got to help myself. And then, but just to open it forward so that people say, okay, this is the kind of help I need. Maybe yoga, maybe mindfulness, maybe I can start there. That's what I can afford. Maybe hot yoga is the thing for me, and I'll try that. And I'll try that for 4 to 6 weeks. But I make sure I'll give myself enough time to get into a flow, to let my body get introduced to it, so that I get rid of my being self-conscious, and then see what happens on the other side of it. Give it time. Give yourself some time. I always like 4 to 6 weeks for anything, just to see what the body will do with it. Um, and I think it's just, if people are willing to do that and ask for help, they can reach out to me. They can I encourage people to reach out to you, to you're over there
I'd
in
love
Australia?
to.
Okay.
Thank you so much, David. That's just
Uh,
so wonderful. Thank you for your
yeah.
time today. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Really
Well,
grateful.
yeah. Well, it's been, well, I knew there's a reason why you and I kept banging around. We kept running into each other via social media, and even
Absolutely.
when I was in Australia earlier this year, we're just in a rush to get back. We drove from Noosa down to Sydney, and
I'm so
kind of
sorry I
saw.
missed you.
Oh, but I'm gonna we'll try to get next year. Now that we've actually
Absolutely.
now we've actually
Absolutely.
had we've had this interaction, but yes, thank you for your time. And I know it's a big conversation to have in a short period of time, but hopefully we add a little bit of clarity, or at least some possibility of, okay, well, maybe, yes, I was thinking that maybe I should try this, and now I will. So hopefully we encourage people to do so. All
Thank
right.
you
Well,
so
thank you
much,
so.
David.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And guys, thanks for hanging out and listening to our conversation
Mm.
amidst the technical issues that we had along the way. And I know there's women out there that have had that they messaged me and they said they found a way to, and they found a way to really arrest the symptoms. Fasting came up as a conversation as a tool pretty frequently. Intermittent fasting, lifestyle dietary changes, all those things make a difference. And I think if you're challenged on where to start because you feel overwhelmed, ask for help, because help is help is out there, and there's people like us that want to help, that really, really do, because we invested this time in this conversation,
Absolutely.
because we see something that's really not being addressed exceptionally well, and hopefully this will stir on a bunch of self-exploration for everybody that was listening. All right.
Thank you so
Okay.
much, David.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
darling.
you.
I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. Okay.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.